One of my favorite things about video games are the wide array of emotions that video games can elicit from its players. I think it's really cool that we have a medium that can make you feel excited, make you feel happy, make you feel sad, make you feel fearful, all those different emotions. And I think it's really cool that we have a medium like video games that can elicit those emotions from the player. And my favorite emotion, though, to feel when playing a game is probably the sense of comfort and coziness that you can get from certain games. For me, I like to call these games warm blanket games. And the reason for that is because when I play these games, I get like a sense of bliss that I feel. And the closest thing I can really equate that to in the real world would be like imagine it's a cold winter's evening and you grab a warm blanket and you put it around you and you're just instantly filled up with that warmth. That's the feeling that these games give to me, which is why I've actually called them warm blanket games. Now, one of my favorite warm blanket games is actually Ghost of Tsushima. Now, after saying that, you may be thinking, well, how in the world is Ghost of Tsushima a warm blanket game? Isn't that a game about the violent invasion of Tsushima Island by the Mongol Empire? And while you would be correct in summarizing the plot of the game there, I am here today to tell you exactly how Ghost of Tsushima is a warm blanket game for me. So let's get into it. All right, it is now time for your friendly neighborhood spoiler warning. So, like I said, I won't be getting into the finer details of Ghost of Tsushima's narrative. However, I will be spoiling, ruining, whatever you'd like to say, several of the side quests as well as the main quest of the game, I would say. So, if you don't want to have anything spoiled for you from this fantastic game, what I would suggest is, save this video to your watch later and maybe leave it a like and save it in your liked videos and then go play the game, come back, and then you can watch my video to see if you agree or disagree with that. But with that out of the way, we are going to get into the meat of the video. So there's your spoiler warning, so act as you see fit. All right, so now that I've kind of described the feeling that I get from warm blanket games, I think it's important before we specifically get into Ghost of Tsushima to go over my criteria for warm blanket games. Now, if you watched any of my videos in the past, especially the How Well Is It Aged series, what I normally look at are four categories of a game. So, world building, narrative, visuals, and then gameplay. Where I look at those in terms of how well is the game aged, all four of those categories don't necessarily come into play for a warm blanket game. So, for example, a warm blanket game could qualify itself as a warm blanket game simply based on its visuals or, just its narrative or any of those. However, the when I think of warm blanket games just off the top of my head, they usually excel in at least two of those four categories. Now, I think Ghost of Tsushima personally excels in all four of the categories, but I would say what really sends it over the edge for me to be a warm blanket game is its visuals and its world building. Because the whole thing that makes a game a warm blanket game is the fact that I want to go into the world and experience it, and I can really just get lost when I start these games. So for me, Ghost of Tsushima achieves that feeling of immersion and getting lost in the world through its visuals and its world building. So I won't be talking about its narrative or its gameplay. Really, I'll mention them here and there, but I won't really get into the deep nitty gritty of those two categories. But yeah, so for me, the reason Ghost of Tsushima excels and is a warm blanket game is based on its visuals and its world building. So, getting into the visuals of Ghost of Tsushima, I mean, calling this game anything less than stunning would really be doing it a disservice, in my opinion. Ghost of Tsushima's map is beautiful at every turn. The three main areas of the base game, as well as Iki Island, just have such a distinct feel most of the time and just look amazing. I mean, in Izuhara, you have the resplendent views or hues, excuse me, of the Golden Temple. You then move into Toyotama, which has kind of like a swamp feeling at the beginning and then gradually works its way into feeling more like a fall landscape, moving towards Kama Igata. I believe I'm saying that correctly. It's more of a winter area for the game and has just a totally different feel from Izuhara and Toyotama. You then get into Iki Island, which has a real like summer vibe, in my opinion, which I think is really cool. So each the area offers something different in the form of like biome as well as its visuals. So I'm not going to go into exhaustive detail about every region, but I am going to go through all three regions of the base game as well as Iki Island and just kind of tell you guys what I love about the visuals of each of these areas. So we're going to start with Izuhara, so let's get into it. All right, beginning with Izuhara, Ghost of Tsushima really pulls no punches at the start of its game visually. It looks incredible. I love so many of the areas in Izuhara. It's probably my favorite region just based on visuals, but I really want to focus on two areas just briefly here. The first one is the Golden Temple. It's probably the first major landmark that most of the players will encounter, and it just looks so good. When you arrive at the Golden Temple, there are these yellow leaves all over the ground, and the light is really bouncing off all the structures, and the leaves are constantly falling. And it just doesn't matter what time of day you're at the Golden Temple, it always looks amazing. And it's just one of my favorite places to visit. And I just love walking around the Golden Temple and kind of just getting lost in the comings and goings of the peasants, I guess, of Tsushima Island. So that is the Golden Temple is one of my favorite places in Izuhara. And my second favorite place is actually the Ariake Lighthouse because you can climb to the top of the lighthouse and reignite the brazier, but you can also just stand there and look at the waves as they come in from a really high vantage point. And I just think it's super cool how much care has gone into this game and making it look just incredible. So Izuhara is filled to the brim with beautiful locations and vistas for the player to enjoy, while Jin is recruiting allies to help him take back Castle Canada. So after Izuhara, the player moves into Toyotama, and Toyotama has a pretty big shift, in my opinion, in its biome. So Izuhara is a lot of just like wooded area, not a lot of there's like rivers and stuff, but not any swamps. But when you first get to the south of Toyotama, it's very swampy. I don't know how else to put it. There's a lot of swamplands in the area, and it's a cool shift, and it also still looks really incredible, which I've seen other games try to do swamplands that have not done it as well as they did it in Ghost of Tsushima. But um the main landmark that I want to point out in Toyotama is definitely Castle Shimura. So Castle Shimura is kind of the capstone, if you will, for Act 2. It's the like main objective. You're trying to retake the castle from the Mongols, and where the south of Toyotama is more of a swampland. The further you go north, it really gets into like this autumn forest type mountain range. So the trees are starting to turn. There's lots of yellow, orange, red trees up there. But Castle Shimura itself sits on either side of a waterfall. So there's a big bridge that crosses the waterfall, and the castle just looks really good up on the mountains with the snow peaks behind them. And yeah, I was really impressed with Toyotama. I didn't think that they could top Izuhara, and I don't know that it necessarily is better than Izuhara, but Izuhara is so good, and I think Toyotama is at least on its level. After Toyotama, the player moves into Kamiagata, and once again, there's a pretty dramatic shift in not only the biome, but I would say just overall feel of the landscape. So, as I said, getting further north in Toyotama, you're getting into more like the autumn season, I would say, in Tsushima. Whereas in Kamiagata, it is full blown winter. There is snow everywhere. It's very frigid, but it has this like chilling beauty to it. However, one of the like most striking landscapes in Kamiagata, in my opinion, is the Keen Sanctuary. Now, you arrive at the Keen Sanctuary, and it it's on the edge of the endless forest, but the entire endless forest as well as Keen Sanctuary has been set on fire. And so not much remains but like smoldering ashes as well as just desolation. Honestly, it's just there's this hopeless beauty to it. Every time I'm at Keene Sanctuary, I just can't help but think like, what did this place used to look like? You know, this forest that is said to be endless. I'm sure it was incredibly beautiful, but it's just been destroyed by the Mongols. And once you get to the sanctuary, there's this really big tree at kind of the center of the sanctuary, but it's been set on fire and just absolutely destroyed. So I think the more time I spend in Keene Sanctuary, the more I just wonder like, what did this used to look like? You know, it must have been incredible because it's such a landmark for the game. You know, it's at like I said, it's at the end of the endless forest. It's it has this giant tree that I'm sure had like very big cultural significance to it, and it's just not there anymore, and it's really sad to see. So that is one of my like most memorable landmarks in Kamiagata. But to end this section on more of a high note, my other favorite is the Jogaku Temple. Now, like I said, winter set in, so I just love seeing the pagodas with the snow caked over them and the bamboo forests that have just layers and layers of snow. So it's just a really cool place to kind of reconvene after all the events of Act Two and really the um, start the events of Act Three. So those are kind of my two favorite areas in Kamiagata, but it has plenty of just beautiful vistas, and the like icy chill that's over the whole region is really interesting to me, and a nice shift from the previous two regions. The final area of Ghost of Tsushima is Iki Island. Now, Iki Island is a completely separate portion of the map that was released in a DLC about a year after the main game came out. And it definitely has a lot of the same overtones of the three base game regions. So it has, you know, bright colors that really pop, lots of elevation, beautiful vistas, waterfalls, all the stuff from the base game. But it adds its own flair to it by having more of a summertime feeling. So none of the three areas from the base game, in my opinion, really feel like summertime, but Iki Island definitely does. Now, the reason for that, in my opinion, is that there's no snow on the map. You can really tell that the water is a different color, in my opinion, on the beaches. It feels like it has more of a cerulean tint, which just reminds me of like being at the beach in the summer. So maybe that's why I'm thinking of it as a summer biome. But regardless, the two areas I find most impactful from Iki Island are going to be the Monkey Temple, or excuse me, not the Monkey Temple, the Monkey Sanctuary located in the southwestern region of Iki Island. It's a very tall mountain that you have to climb, but once you get to the top, you get this like beautiful view of Iki Island. You can really see like all the different areas and the waves rolling in, and I just love that vast overview that this section gives you. The second location that I would like to discuss is Sinjo Gorge. Now, Sinjo Gorge is very important to the story of Iki Island. It's where Jin's dad was killed, and so it just holds a lot of negative emotions for Jin. But it's interesting to me that they chose a place of such importance and a place where, you know, something so traumatic happened to the main character to be as beautiful as it is. There's these purple wisteria trees that are just dropping their leaves everywhere, and the elevation's really cool to play with because, like I said, it is a gorge. And I just love the fact that they chose such a beautiful landscape for such a traumatic event. I think it has a nice juxtaposition there. But Iki Island was such a great addition to the game. I think it really adds adds on to what the base game did visually and increases it slightly in certain areas. But yeah, so Iki Island to me, A plus, great visuals. Now, I want to take a brief moment and discuss the weather of Ghost of Tsushima. Now, I know, most of the time you mention the weather, you are the most boring person in the room, of course. However, I think if you were to mention the weather of Ghost of Tsushima, you might be the most interesting person in the room. Now, I've never seen developers make a thunderstorm look so good. I don't know how they do it. I'm not smart enough to know that, but just the thunderstorms look incredible in this game. Now, let's say you're not a fan of the rain. Ghost of Tsushima has one of the coolest mechanics, in my opinion, to change the weather. So all you have to do in order to change the weather is swipe on the touchpad, and Jin will pull out his flute and begin to play it. And the longer he plays the melody, the more the weather changes. So it'll go from a pure thunderstorm, very cloudy, overcast, to a bright sunny day. And I think that's just amazing that they have added such like a nice touch to the game. So yeah, that's all about the weather. Just wanted to briefly touch on that. Beautiful scenery in a game means next to nothing if that world doesn't have some substance in it. And as we previously established, yes, Ghost of Tsushima is indeed beautiful, but what takes it over the line for a warm blanket game for me is having great world building. I think that, as I said, the a world being beautiful is important, but if there's nothing for the player to engage with that the player feels is meaningful, then the visuals will only carry it so far. So great video game worlds, in my opinion, have two traits. The first trait is that there's enough meaningful side content that the player actually wants to engage with it. And let me kind of reframe that a little better. So there needs to be enough side content in the game, but that side content needs to feel meaningful and not feel like bloat. The second trait is that the worlds need to feel like they're constantly moving and evolving. So it needs to feel like the NPCs are not waiting on the player to show up, which I understand is a little bit counterintuitive because, of course, the NPCs are waiting for the player to show up, but there needs to be some kind of sleight of hand to kind of hide the trick a little bit. And I personally believe Ghost of Tsushima excels at both of these traits. There is a plethora of side content for the player to engage with in Ghost of Tsushima. Now, the issue with a lot of open world games that I play lately, or the issue that I'm having with them anyway, is the fact that the map feels like very bloated and it just feels like I'm being drawn out of the immersion way too much by things like a mini map, an oppressive like HUD where every single thing going on in the game is on my screen. And what I mean by that is like you'll have a quest log on the right and then a bunch of stuff down in the corners and then something in the upper left corner, and it's just too much. And so I really am drawn to a very minimalistic style of heads up display. And Ghost of Tsushima does that incredibly well. So a lot of times in the game you won't even notice the heads up display. So even if it is engaged, it's like a health bar down on the left, whatever stance you're in, and then any special ghost items that you have on the right. And that is just such good design in my opinion, because when you're just riding through the world, all that goes away, and you can really just focus on the world that the developer has created. Because I think my biggest issue with all the heads up display in a lot of other games is that it breaks that immersion. It takes me out of the world that the developers have created, and it just feels kind of like a menu or chores. It feels more like chores to do, in my opinion. So the fact that there's no oppressive heads up display is a really masterful touch in Ghost of Tsushima. Another thing that I'm glad they don't have, which is a part of the heads up display usually, is a mini map. Now, mini maps, in my opinion, are just unnecessary. I don't think mini maps are needed in 2024. I think it just adds more clutter to the screen, but there still needs to be a way for the player to know where to go next. And Ghost of Tsushima handles the that aspect in such an incredible way, in my opinion. What Ghost of Tsushima does is you put a point on the map and then you just swipe up on the touchpad and the wind literally guides you to the next location. So it feels like the world is telling you, okay, no, you need to go this way. Oh, you need to go a little more right. And that is such a masterstroke, in my opinion, because it doesn't break the immersion. And that is really the goal, maybe not the goal, what I'm looking for when a heads up display is in a game. I want it to feel seamless and not break my immersion. So, overall, as far as as adding or refusing to add such oppressive elements to Ghost of Tsushima really enhanced my immersion of the game, which is very important when I'm looking at whether or not a game is a warm blanket game or not. All right, we now need to discuss the density of Ghost of Tsushima's map. Now, there are a ton of question marks that are dotted all across all the regions, including Iki Island. And the on the face of it, if you just looked at the map and saw all the question marks, you would be like, "Oh, this is too much. It's so ridiculous that all these question marks are just in my face." But the only way that the question marks become available on the map is for the player to clear the fog of war around that question mark. So when you first get into Ghost of Tsushima or get to a new region, the whole region will just have this like smoke over it in the map. But as Jin travel, well, there's a couple ways Jin can clear the fog of war. I'll get into that in just a second. But in order for a question mark to like even pop up, Jin has to be close enough to it to where the fog is cleared, and you're like, okay, there's a there's a question mark. So that really helps because it feels much more manageable that you're not seeing like 50 question marks in Izahara and you're like, oh my god, I can never get through this. But if you're just kind of running around and exploring and you pick up ones here and there and you're like, oh, I want to go check that out, you're totally free to do that. And I think that's such a cool addition because you don't have to engage with any of this. The player can just go through through story missions to story mission and you'll clear some of the fog of war. Maybe there's a question mark, but if you don't even want to bother with that, you don't have to. And it's only on the map when you pause it. So it's not on a mini map. It's not like flashing in your face as you ride by. It's just like, hey, I'm here. If you want to engage with this, totally cool. If not, now the fog of war is really adds to that, or the fog of war enables that because since the map is clouded, you're not able to see all those question marks. Now, there's a couple of ways that Jin can clear the map. So the first way is just by riding through. So as Jin rides through the map, he will clear out like a path that he's traveled in that is no longer under the fog of war. The second way is to clear Mongol camps. Now, Mongol camps are located all over the regions, and as soon as you clear them, they kind of vibrate and then explode on the map, and a big circle of the fog is cleared out around them. I think this is just such a cool way to handle this because, again, it's there if you want to see it. If not, you don't have to worry about it. But there are like faster ways to clear out the fog of war than simply riding all over across the map because each region has a set number of Mongol camps. So Izahara, I'm not sure off the top of my head what the Mongol camps are, but let's say there's 20. Once you clear all 20 of those camps, then the entire map is unfogged. So that clears the entire fog of war, which is really cool because it allows the map to open up, but it also gives the player an actual objective in the game. So in order to free up the whole map, you can either explore all of it yourself, or you can simply clear out the Mongol camps, and you're like helping Tsushima Island in that instance, and also achieving something for yourself by clearing out the fog of war. So the fact that there's no oppressive heads-up display and the exploration feels valuable because you have to get close enough to see these question marks really add to my immersion, and it really hits just a sweet spot for me as far as open world side content goes. So there's a ton you can do, but you're not constantly bombarded with it, which, as I said, is the most important thing in my opinion, is not getting bombarded by side content because that really breaks the immersion for me at least. All right, now let's get into the meat and potatoes of the side content. There are several different types of side content. There's kind of a few different, I would say 3 or 4 categories of side content that the player can engage with in Ghost of Tsushima. Now, the real key for me with these side missions or like little activities is that none of them overstay their welcome in Ghost of Tsushima. So, what I mean by that is that all these can be completed rather quickly. So, while there is a lot of certain activities to be done, they're really quick to complete, and so it doesn't feel fatiguing, which is really important because the side content feels meaningful. And even when it gets to the point where it's like, this is, I'm not really seeing the fruits of my labor for the side content, it's quick enough that you're just like, oh, I'll just go do that real quick, it's no big deal. So that's a really key point for me when it comes to Ghost of Tsushima side content. There is a lot of it, and most of it is meaningful, but even the parts that aren't meaningful don't stay long enough to become tedious or annoying. All right. So as previously mentioned, there are a couple different categories of side missions, side content, whatever you want to say, that the player can engage with in Ghost of Tsushima. One of those categories are what are known as activities. Now, this consists of bamboo strikes, duels, archery challenges, animal sanctuaries, common courtesies, haikus, and then a Boken tournament. Now, this is kind of intermingled together with activities from the base game as well as activities from Iki Island. So I'm just going to go through them just briefly and kind of explain what they do and how to complete them. But yeah, so the first thing you can do are the bamboo strikes. Now, this is a really cool way to increase Jin's attack power, in my opinion. So what you do is you walk up to the bamboo strike, and the there's like a series of buttons you need to hit. So there, at first it's three, then it's five, and then I believe it's seven after that. So you have to hit the buttons consecutively, like quickly enough, so that Jin will slice through all the bamboo strikes. And once Jin is able to slice through all seven bamboo strikes, it increases his resolve, which is the healing mechanic in the game. And this is just a super cool way for the player to become more powerful, be able to heal better. And like I said, it's super quick. So these take like maybe 30 seconds to do. There were a couple that took me a few minutes because I couldn't get the buttons down correctly, but most of the time these will take just a few minutes, or excuse me, a few seconds, and not be very long at all, which again is huge because these do not overstay their welcome. The second thing in the activities category are what are called duels, and these are some of my favorite encounters in the whole game. They're incredibly cinematic. They always take place in like these great vistas or like beautiful landscapes, or there's one that takes place like next to a waterfall and it's raining and it just looks incredible. Now, the cinematic nature of this cannot be overstated. When you first show up, there's like a little cutscene that plays where Jin and his opponent are kind of facing off, and the it cuts back and forth, and then Jin just clicks his sword out of the scabbard, and then you're right in the duel. And it's just a cool way to like have mini boss fights all around the map and make it feel like really cinematic and really fun. The next thing is the Boken tournament, which is very similar to the duels. Now, this takes place on Iki Island in Fune's Refuge, but they're not as quite as cinematic as the duels because they take place in this one little space and it doesn't look that great in the specific arena. But it's like it's a different type of challenge. So in the duels, you're obviously fighting to like dispatch your enemy and kill them. But in the Boken tournament, all you're trying to do is hit them 5 times with a wooden sword before they hit you. So it just kind of mixes up the combat and like forces you as Jin to rethink your strategy and kind of polish up on some of the areas of combat that you may not have been taking as close or paying as close attention to. So the Boken tournament is really fun, and it really helps perfect your timing with dodging and attacking and whatnot. The archery challenges are also found on Iki Island, and these are so much fun. I love doing these. So they're scattered all across Iki Island, and they essentially allow Jin to complete a carnival type shooting challenge. So there are 3 tiers that Jin needs to complete. Now, the tiers are based on how quickly Jin can take out all of the lanterns next to or at each archery challenge. Now, in order to fully complete these challenges, Jin will have to shoot all three of the lanterns in most of the time under 8 seconds. And now this sounds ridiculous, and it is without a certain mechanic, which is the concentration mechanic. So there's a mechanic that allows Jin to slow down time, and that is slow down time when he's shooting the bow. So it allows him to hit more targets quickly without the timer running down. Now, the base level of concentration is just not enough to complete these challenges for most players, in my opinion. However, each time you complete one of the archery challenges, even at the bronze level, your charm of concentration is slightly increased. So, the more challenges you complete, the easier they become because Jin can slow time for longer. And it's just a super fun little activity you can do to improve your concentration, which will help you more in the game if you like to use archery. And it's just a really fun way to wander around the map on Iki Island and shoot some lanterns as fast as possible. The sanctuaries are all on Iki Island. There's three types of sanctuaries: deer, monkey, and cat sanctuaries. And these sanctuaries force the player to use the motion sensors in the controller, which isn't used a ton, but I thought it's like really done pretty well in these. So what you essentially have to do is you sit down and Jin begins to play his flute, and there's like two bars, and you need to stay in the middle of those bars with this big sphere, excuse me, with your controller. And the better you're playing the song on the flute, the closer the animal will get to you. And then at the end, you get to pet the animal, and it'll like upgrade your charm. And I just think that's cool. Like, it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's very quick, and you get to pet a cute animal and get a charm out of it. So all good with me. The next activity are the haikus. Now, these are so cinematic, just incredibly cinematic. Jin will sit down at the little mat to write a haiku, and this beautiful music plays in the background, and the player actually chooses each line of the haiku. So you'll sit down, and there's like a specific prompt. It'll say, like, reflect on hope. And then you are able to compose your own haiku on what you think hope means, or how you would express hope in haiku form. And it's just really cool because after it, Jin gets a cosmetic headband, and each one of them is different, and that headband actually memorializes your specific haiku. So it's just a great way for the player to like sit back and reflect and relax and think about the themes of the game, which I think is like just a great way for the developers to get the players to think more deeply about the game. So that's all the activities for Ghost of Tsushima. I really enjoy these because, like I said, they're quick and they all add to the game in meaningful ways, in my opinion. So you have the duels and the Boken tournament, which helps you improve in your combat. And then you have things like the bamboo strike that helps increase your resolve, which makes your healing more efficient. And the archery challenges also increase your, charm of concentration, which will help you if you play an archery type build, if there even are builds in Ghost of Tsushima. Then the sanctuaries get you more charms, and just let you engage with the world more. And the haikus force the player to slow down and really reflect. So I like the activities in this game. They don't overstay their welcome at all. I think there's a perfect amount of each of these. And yeah, I just enjoy the activities of Ghost of Tsushima. The next category of side content in Ghost of Tsushima are the exploration activities, and these are slightly longer than the just regular activities, but they're still relatively quick, and they provide the player a boost in Jin's health, better charms, or reward the player with cosmetic items. So the first exploration activity are the Inari shrines, or the fox dens, as most people will know them by. So there's 49 of these, and this is the only side mission or piece of side content where I could do with less. 49 of these feels like a lot. However, again, the thing that doesn't get send this over the line to being annoying for me is that they're pretty quick. I mean, you can do these in a minute or two. So Jin will walk up to a fox and he follows the fox to its den, which is a shrine. Jin then honors the shrine and he's granted a better charm or a new charm. And like I said, the sheer volume of these really started to get to me near the end of my most recent playthrough, and it's the only thing in the game that really starts to overstay its welcome, but just slightly. Not enough to be annoying, in my opinion, but I could see why other people would consider this annoying. But the lore reasons for the foxes being there is very interesting to me. I had no idea until I read some more about this in the game. So, in Japanese culture, foxes are Inari's messengers and they are drawn to sacred places. So, this definitely doesn't take away all the annoyance, but the lore mixed in, and the fact that you get to pet the foxes at the end and it's pretty short, I think it does reduce the tedium slightly for the fox dens. Next, we have the Pillars of Honor. Now, there's not a lot to say about these. They're just essentially shrines to fallen warriors all over Tsushima. And Jin walks up to them and he collects a new skin for his katana. And it's just super quick and a cool way to get new cool cosmetic items. Now, the Shinto shrines are more exploration content that the player can engage with, and these are a way for Jin to get new charms, and it's essentially a climbing puzzle. So Jin needs to figure out how to get to the next handhold and get to the top of the shrine. These are longer. These might take you 3 to 5 minutes to complete, I would say, but they always offer like a really nice view at the end, like a great vista to see. So that's pretty good juice for the relatively painless squeeze of climbing to the top of one of these shrines, in my opinion. Next, we have the hot springs. Now, these can be found across the island, and as Jin completes these, his maximum health is completed. Now, again, these are super quick, don't take very long. They're usually under a minute, I think. But what I love about these is that once Jin is in the hot spring, two prompts come up, and the player is able to choose what Jin will reflect on. So it's a nice way for the player to kind of see behind the curtain and know what's going on in Jin's mind and figure out what he's thinking regarding the events that have occurred in his life and also in the game. The lighthouses on Tsushima can also be reignited. Now, all these do is increase the player's legend, which will just increase the player's legend. However, if you look at the lighthouses in the menu, it actually says that by reigniting these lighthouses, Jin is giving hope to the people of the island, which is just a sweet piece of lore. I mean, that's all it really is. And again, all you have to do is climb to the top of these, reignite the brazier, and that's it. Nothing crazy. And I just think it has a cool lore reason for why Jin would want to complete this. And again, you get some stunning views at the top of these lighthouses. Iki Island offers a unique type of exploration. There are 4 wind shrines located all across the island. Now, these shrines are a puzzle that the player needs to solve, and they consist of Jin donning a particular piece of armor and completing a certain action. So, there's one shrine where Jin has to heal himself in a particular armor. But the really cool part about this, because I understand that on the face of this, it doesn't look terribly inspiring. It's just like, oh, okay, gotta complete a puzzle. But the thing that makes these incredibly interesting to me is that each of the 4 shrines pays homage to another PlayStation exclusive. So there's one for Bloodborne, there's one for God of War, there's one for Horizon Zero Dawn, and then there's one for the Shadow of Colossus. So, and each time Jin completes one of the shrines, he's rewarded with a new armor appearance that corresponds to that PlayStation exclusive. So it's just like I said, a really cool way for the developers to kind of pay respects to other PlayStation exclusives, and I just love the fact that they chose to add that to the game. Another category of side content for Ghost of Tsushima are artifacts. There's several of these types of artifacts that the player can collect, and I just kind of lump these together because they're all essentially just collectibles. There's Mongol artifacts, Mongol records, and then there's the records of Iki, which help color in the lines. All three of those help color in the lines of what's going on in or on Tsushima Island, what the Mongols are thinking, why did they choose to invade Tsushima. Just kind of like adds a little bit of lore behind the story, but again, not necessary. But those are the records from both Iki Island and the Mongol records. There's also banners that can be collected on both Tsushima and Iki, and they grant the player more cosmetic items. The more you get, the like you take him to a dye merchant, and he gives you new types of cosmetics. Another artifact are the singing crickets, and these are super cool because as you collect more crickets, Jin is able to play different songs on the flute. So, just like a nice way for the player to unlock some more customization in regard to the songs on Jin's flute. Um, there's also the, excuse me, the memories um, that are located on Iki Island. So these memories focus on Jin and his dad while they were on Iki Island and the comings and goings, and you really see kind of what Jin was going through when his dad chose to go to Iki Island, and after his death, how he really grapples with that as a um, the young leader of Clan Sakai. So these are the different types of side content, excluding side missions, which I will get into shortly. But all the exploration activities, the exploration activities, artifacts, all that side content is completely optional, and some of it will make Jin more powerful, but none of it has to be completed in order for you to complete the whole game. And it's just something that I love engaging with because it helps me understand the world of Tsushima better, and it teaches me about Japanese customs and just seeing all the beautiful vistas. That's a really good way to do it, is by engaging in the side content. So in short, the side content adds to the world of Ghost of Tsushima, especially to its world building, in some really fantastic ways, and it does so by feeling meaningful and without overstaying its welcome for the most part. All right, so now that we've covered the kind of activities and whatnot that you can do in Ghost of Tsushima, let's move on to the side missions. Now, as I previously stated, the most important things for world building for me are that the side content feels meaningful and that the world feels like it's constantly moving. And these side missions really achieve both of those goals. So, the NPCs, when you approach them to begin their side mission, they're always doing something when Jin shows up. So they may be doing chores or like prepping for battle or whatever it may be. So the NPC is like very clearly waiting for Jin to show up. But they did a nice trick here where it's like, oh, we're just prepping, and like whenever Jin gets here or whatever. And even sometimes it feels like Jin has just caught these people by chance a little bit, which is nice that they've added that. But there's two types of side quests in Ghost of Tsushima. Excuse me. There are the Tales of Tsushima and then the Mythic Tales. So the Tales of Tsushima have two different variants within them. There are the tales that are just one-offs. They're not tied to a specific NPC or main NPC, I should say. They're just singular events that take a few minutes usually. They really feel very episodic in that way, and they vary in subject matter. But essentially, they boil down to Jin helping the residents of Tsushima. He may be helping them find a lost loved one, maybe retake their home from the Mongols, or even oust a fake samurai in one of the missions, which was pretty fun. I found these tales enjoyable because they give the player a glimpse into how the invasion is affecting the common people, if you will. I think it's really interesting when large historical events happen, such as Tsushima's invasion by the Mongols. A lot of these events only focus on the major players, so they leave out the finer details of what was happening to the small folk in while these were going while these major events were going on. So these one-off tales of Tsushima are not necessary for the story if you just want to get like the main points, but they do color in the lines in a very interesting way, in my opinion. The second type of the Tales of Tsushima, the second variant, I should say, are the ones who follow a common thread with one specific ally of Jin's. Now, all of the major allies have these quest lines, so Sensei Ishikawa, Lady Masako, Kenji, Yuna, Norio, and Yuriko all have quest lines for Jin to complete, and some of these need to be started but don't have to be completed, and some of them are completely optional. So Jin needs help to retake the island of Tsushima, and he needs to recruit powerful allies in order to help him retake this island. Now, luckily for Jin, there's lots of options for him, as I said, as I listed off previously. So the beauty of these quest lines is that they're very similar to what I like about the one-off tales, but the NPC quest lines really allow the player to spend more time with Jin's allies. So you're helping Jin's allies do something, but also learning more about the characters and what motivates them, and you really get to see their growth throughout these quest lines. I won't be going into terrible detail about them right here, or at all really. But Lady Masako's, you're helping her find out who murdered her entire family. So the quest line starts, and Masako's entire family, Clan Arachi, has been murdered, and she, quite rightfully so, wants to know who did this. And you see her grow as a person from just blind rage and feeling like she has nothing to live for throughout the quest line, which spans over all three regions of the base game. You really get to see her evolve and just grow as a person. And I think that's super cool for the player to be able to see the motivations behind Lady Masako and how she deals with grief. Sensei Ishikawa is a famed archer on the island, and he took an apprentice named Tomoe, and he taught Tomoe his famous way of the bow. However, when the Mongols invaded, Tomoe leaves Ishikawa and decides that she's going to start working for the Mongols, and she starts teaching the Mongols the way of the bow. Now, this is very bad for the island, obviously, because as Ishikawa is a famed archer, he and the rest of the occupants of Tsushima definitely do not want to have the Mongols with this, or let the Mongols have this knowledge in their power. So you begin hunting for Tomoe, and the more you engage with this and the more you hunt Tomoe, the more you realize that Ishikawa is definitely hiding something. And the situation is not as black and white as it seemed at the beginning once you get to the end of the quest line. And I really love that about the quest line, because in the end, Ishikawa lets Tomoe leave the island, and he was attempting to control her this whole time. But what I love about this tale, or these tales in specific regarding the sensei, are that they explore the fact that you can't control people. No matter how hard you try, everyone has their own personal agency and motivations, and therefore they're not going to see the world the exact same way that you do. So no matter how close the sensei and Tomoe were at one time, I believe that it's Ishikawa's need to control Tomoe that actually led her to run away, which again just shows his motivations and what he was trying to achieve, and how those aims have gone terribly wrong in this case. Norio is a monk that Jin meets at Fort Ito when Jin and Lord Shimura liberate the fort after retaking Castle Kaneda. And Norio is probably one of the saddest characters, or the most just melancholy characters in Ghost of Tsushima. He is from Cedar Temple and believes that his brother Injo has died. Injo is a very important character and understands Norio on a deeper level because he is his brother. And Injo was a warrior monk who Norio always looked up to. Now, Norio has always compared himself to Injo throughout his whole life, but never felt like he matched up well with his brother. And Norio's questline sees he and Jin free the captured monks. They eventually retake Cedar Temple, and after expelling the Mongols from Cedar Temple, Norio discovers that Injo is alive, but he's been tortured and is on the brink of death. So Norio takes it upon himself to mercifully kill Injo. Then Norio finds out that the Mongol who tortured him is nearby, so he and Jin go to the fort to take out this Mongol, and while Jin is sleeping, Norio puts the fort to the sword and brutally kills the general, sets the whole place on fire. And Norio realizes that he should not have let himself be overcome with the emotions, and decides to return to Cedar Temple in order to continue Injo's work and protect the temple. So while his story is incredibly tragic, he loses, that guiding light in his life that was Injo. After he goes through this whole experience, he now believes that he can reach his goal. He can measure up to Injo. He can be that warrior monk that Cedar Temple needs in order to protect itself. So again, Norio is a character that is really important to the story, and it's nice to kind of get some more of his backstory and understand his motivations and why he wants to become a warrior monk. The next NPC that has a quest line is Yuna. Now, Yuna is one of the most important characters in Ghost of Tsushima. She is just ever present in the main storyline, but I want to kind of just highlight her side quests here. Yuna's side quests begin in Act 2, and Yuna's one of Yuna's friends actually runs an inn that's been overrun with the Mongols. Jin and Yuna show up and they remove the Mongols by force from the inn, but Yuna's friend is not happy about this because she'll now have to face the wrath of Altan, who is the Mongol in charge of the territory. Um, However, no one knows where Altan is located, so Jin and Yuna devise a plan to draw out Altan. And how they do this they decide to kill the Mamushi brothers, and they're natives of the island of Tsushima, but the Mamushi brothers are actually slavers and had once imprisoned Yuna and her brother Taka. And it's implied pretty subtly, or maybe not even subtly, it's definitely apparent, in my opinion, that Yuna sold Taka to the Mamushi brothers because they had no money for food. So Yuna is really reluctant to enter the farmstead where the Mamushi brothers reside. And because she's just so overwhelmed with her past, she's not able to face it. Jin decides to take matters into his own hands and he takes out the Mamushi brothers, which eventually draws Altan out. But this Yuna's few Tales of Tsushima are so beautiful to me because Yuna doesn't want to have to confront her past, and she has Jin there to help her. Now, all the past trauma is something that Yuna cannot face, but she also knows she can't keep running from. However, she doesn't have to do either of those things because Jin is there to help her overcome her past and get some closure. The other thing I find very interesting about Yuna's tale is that her friend is initially very upset that Yuna and Jin have intervened at the inn because it puts her in danger. You know, it puts her and the workers in danger. It creates this interesting dynamic that is at odds. It's at odds with what Jin has been doing the entire game. Jin's been defeating the Mongols and helping the people of Tsushima. Jin, however, is a warrior, and most of the inhabitants of Tsushima are not warriors, and therefore they're kind of just forced to do whatever they must to survive. And Yuna's friend is one of these people, simply doing what she needs to survive, and by intervening, Jin and Yuna have put her in danger. And I'm not sure where I fall on this issue because, on the one hand, Jin does have to take out the Mongols in order to free the island, but he cannot be everywhere at once. So, how many people have been harmed because of his actions when he's not around to take the repercussions from the Mongols, and instead the common people of Tsushima have to deal with those consequences. So it's just a fascinating dilemma that kind of blurs the lines on what is actually good for the island. But these tales are only a snapshot of Yuna's character. As I said, she's very important to the main story, which I will not be getting into in this video, but she is very important. All right, Kenji is the lovable sake selling swindler of Ghost of Tsushima. Kenji starts the game as comic relief and kind of grows into a more stand-up individual, if you will. His side content or side missions, excuse me, are pretty much just Jin and he running around swindling the Mongols and getting Kenji out of tight spaces that he's got himself into by swindling so many different people. So they're just a fun way to get to know more about Kenji and why he has decided to why has he decided to take this life as the swindling sake merchant? Yuriko is a attendant at Jin's estate. So she has been overseeing Clan Sakai for a very long time. She was very close with Jin's father as well as Jin when he was growing up. And she only has a couple missions, but they really help show about the background that Jin grew up around with his father and what his father was going through after his mother's death. It's even revealed that Yuriko and Jin's father actually hooked up. They got a little spicy with it. So it's they're not long tales, but they kind of help show who Yuriko was and how important she was to Clan Sakai. So not a whole lot to say about Yuriko. She's a really important character for understanding the backstory, but aside from that, there's not a whole lot with Yuriko. She's not incredibly important with the current events, in my opinion.
Hey everyone, Future Pat here. While editing this video, specifically getting the capture footage for Yuriko's questline, I realized I was incredibly wrong about how important Yuriko is in the story. So please disregard what I previously said about her not being very important to the overall story. The reason she is important, however, is because she helps Jin brew the poison that is used at the end of Act 2 to poison the Mongols and help retake Castle Shimura. So while she is the long-standing attendant of Clan Sakai, also slept with Jin's dad, her place in the story is incredibly important based on the fact that she did help Jin learn how to make the poison that he uses at the end of Act 2. So just wanted to throw that in here at the end of Yuriko's questline just to clear up my incredibly wrong initial thought that Yuriko was not important to the main questline. So just wanted to let you guys know that, and yeah, we'll be moving on to the next segment.
So the Tales of Tsushima are really important to the story, but they're not necessary. So the Tales of Tsushima allow players to experience what's going on with Tsushima with the small folk, as well as kind of get to know Jin's allies who are helping him retake the island more. And it's just nice. Like I said, it's not necessary, but they do add a lot to the game in regard to knowing people's motivations and learning what's actually going on with the island. So yeah, that's about it with the Tales of Tsushima. They do a really good job of being meaningful as well as making the world feel like it's constantly moving. All right, the last piece of content, side content we need to talk about in Ghost of Tsushima are the mythic tales. Now, these are located all across the base game as well as in Iki Island, and Jin will approach a singer or a storyteller, singer slash storyteller, and then that singer will recount a famous legend of Tsushima. So it may be a legend about an armor or perhaps a new move that Jin needs to learn or a new weapon. And the way that the singer recounts this, or I should say, as the singer is recounting the tale, this beautiful cutscene always plays with this calligraphy art style, kind of adding weight to the singer's words by showing us what happened in the past. And I just love the brush strokes on the screen when these play. It's just a really cool way to it's a cool way for the game to show us the events of the past, but also give it like a cool, or not, give it an interesting visual representation. Now, these I find really interesting, the mythic tales, because what they do is they give you these legends of Tsushima, and so it's kind of like, oh, these aren't real. This armor's not real. This move's not real. It's just a legend. But then Jin is able to investigate and really figure out what is fact or fiction in regard to these mythic tales. And I just think that's super cool because it just adds another level of enrichment to the game by having these like incredible legendary pieces of gear or legendary moves that no one else knows, and Jin is able to figure out where they're located and learn those moves and whatnot. So not a whole lot to say about the mythic tales. They're really fun and definitely reward the player with like valuable rewards at the end. So yeah, don't have a ton to say about these, but the calligraphy art style is amazing. Couldn't be any better. All right. Well, that's all I have to say really about the side content of Ghost of Tsushima. It's incredible to me that they've made a game where you can go through the main story and not engage with any of the side content, and then you still get a meaningful experience. However, the side content is really there to enrich the game, And by having a side content that is only there to enrich the game and not be skill checks for players or like stop gaps where they need to level up to move on to the next mission, it creates a meaningful world. And that is one of my favorite parts about Ghost of Tsushima, the fact that the side content feels meaningful and it really gives the substance behind the beauty of the visuals of the game. But I'm interested in what you all think about the side content of Ghost of Tsushima. What would you say is your favorite activity or exploration, or maybe it's the Mythic Tales? I would like to know what your favorite piece of side content is in Ghost of Tsushima. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for watching today. I absolutely just love Ghost of Tsushima. Every time I boot up this game, I'm just amazed at the links that Sucker Punch, excuse me, that Sucker Punch went to in creating such a beautiful world, but also a world that has a lot of substance behind it. And that's what makes it a cozy game for me. It's a world that I constantly want to inhabit and see what's going on. And every time I boot up the game, I may not see something new because there's just not a whole lot of new things I could see in this game at this point. But I don't know. I just love inhabiting this world and seeing what it has to offer. And I just really enjoy Ghost of Tsushima. It's an incredibly important game for me. Now, if you did enjoy this video, I would really appreciate it if you would like, subscribe, as well as tell a friend about the channel and really help grow my channel. You know, do your part to make my channel bigger. I would really appreciate that. But no, all jokes aside, I really enjoy making these videos. I love talking about video games in general, but especially action adventure games. So I will definitely be back soon, and I hope you all have a beautiful time until then, and I will see you in the next one.